Let's do it. Let's do it. Am I live? Am I live? Mic check. Can we get a mic check? Am I live? Am I alive? Am I among the living? That's a totally different question, unfortunately, but it looks like I'm live. So if you're watching this later, you might want to jump forward probably like 5 minutes. I'll put the timestamp in the description. I always say I'm going to do that, but I never actually do. And if it's not your first time here, you know the deal. I have to go to YouTube and copy the link to my own show, which I will do right now. But I already wrote the tweet because it's professional hours. What's up, Pablo? What's up, Aaron? How's it going? So I'm going to paste this on Twitter. Yo, I also could post this on Telegram. I have a Telegram now. I'm going to do that for the 50 people that follow me on Telegram. And then we'll get this going. I'm amped. How you guys doing? What's up, Isidore? I actually thought of you painting show regular recently because I looked up who the patron saint of technology is. And it's a guy named Isidore. And I wondered if that's why you chose that name. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. Boom. Okay, what's up? So we started a minute late. I'm just going to get my paints together. We'll hang for a minute. The pre-show. I think I said this last week, but I cut the pre-show out for the first episode of Season 3, and someone commented, oh no, they cut the pre-show out. I love that part. And I was like, wow. Someone really likes the pre-show. That's solid. So we'll hang for a second. Get my papers together. Get my things going on. How you guys doing, though? Let me know how you guys are doing. I always ask on Patreon, on here, on Twitter. I ask, how you guys doing? Like, let me know how you're doing. And people like it, and people ask me how I'm doing, but then no one ever tells me how they're doing. No one ever tells me. No one ever says, yeah, I'm doing pretty well. Oh, the camera looks really dark. I'm just going to fix this really quick while we're hanging out for a second. It's really interesting being a painter. Normally I wouldn't talk about tech stuff because I feel like I'm supposed to there we go. I'm supposed to distract from it, you know, right? But it's interesting being a painter and transferring that over to working with video and stuff. You know what I mean? Because it's almost impossible, really, to get a camera to really accurately capture what something looks like in real life. So I have to play with all these different trade-offs, all these different things like that. I had a painting here before, and it looked great. So let's see. This is the painting I found. I found this recently. So normally what I do, I don't know if it's interesting, but I take another painting that we've already done, and I kind of I look at these zones, and I see how they're transferring onto my screen. It looks perfect. This is actually exactly what it looks like in real life. But then oddly, when it's my glove, the glove looks a little darker. So it's really interesting because I've spent my whole life, probably literally every day, for the vast majority of my life thinking about how things look. And then once you master how it looks in real life, then all of a sudden I have to master transferring it over to a machine. And then, in case people don't do visual art, they don't know. And then if you do digital stuff, the part that makes you go insane is so you're working on something in Photoshop, you get it going perfect, and then you're finally happy with how it looks, the gradients, the colors, everything, and you send it to your friend, and then when they pull it up on their phone, the colors look totally different. It's Lovecraftian. It makes you go freaking insane. I can only get away with it because my work is so graphic. Usually, if I was a painter, doing Photoshop paintings, where the light is really subtle and the subtlety of the color is crucial for the image, I would literally go insane. I would lose my mind. Not that I haven't already, but Pablo said, doing well. And you? I'm doing good, man. We'll hang for 2 minutes. We'll launch at 7:04. I want to let people get in, stuff like that. Not that I really care, honestly. It's funny, I mentioned this the other week too, but I've literally never even looked over. I just noticed on this YouTube panel that I can see how many people are watching. And I never even did that, ever. The whole time I've been doing this, I've never stopped and looked to see how many people are watching, because I really don't care. Really don't care. Let's see what else is going down in the chat. Show's put on a suit and tie, cut its hair, got a job. No more hanging out in the pre-show. I know, I should be like all business, like doing my taxes. No, that's cool. I think, I mentioned this on Twitter, but I think that for the last show of the month, we're going to do that like thing where I take symbols from you guys, and then it's kind of more hanging out. I do like hanging out with you guys. Also, the thing is, it's kind of broken up too, because for the first half of the show, since I'm going so hard on like information, then I like using the second half to like talk to people and stuff like that. So I actually do enjoy hanging out with you guys while I do the show, to be completely honest. I guess I would have to say that, but it's actually true. Old digital camcorders struggle to process the color red. It always smears and spoils the image, so orange was used in its place. This is why Michael Bay Transformer movies are blue and orange. Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. Because his film student days, he had camcorders and got used to not using red. Wow, that's really epic. I also noticed when I rewatch one of the old shows, which I never really do, that if I read a comment, sometimes it sounds like I'm just talking, so I'm going to say when I'm reading a comment now. That was a comment from RKD. That's interesting, man, because doing the shirts, that's actually something else I noticed also. I've gravitated away from the warm colors and leaned into the cool colors, which is nice because, you know, low-key, I'm like always vaporwave boy, so I'm down to lean into like the blue to purple spectrum. But it's funny because, yeah, if the shirts are like straight red, like 100% flat red, it doesn't look the same in real life. That's actually one of the only times I ever got someone complaining. I think it might be the only complaint I've ever gotten after like 3 years. I had one shirt where it was just red. Like a whole shirt was red. And when someone got it, they were like, yeah, it doesn't really look like the picture. I was like, all right, fair. And I stopped selling it. So looking forward to the start. Had to rewatch the beginning of the last episode. Word up. Yeah, I'm amped right now. Let's see, it's 7:04. It's about that time. I got my stuff going on over here. Let's do it. The intro is going to say Season 2, but you know it's Season 3, and I am looking at the buttons. There's new intro, intro 2, and actual intro. How much do I trust my old self? Do I press actual intro? I feel like I wouldn't have called it actual intro. That's not what it is. Let's see. Is this the right button? Dude, we are back. We are back to Season 1 level technical stuff right now. What's up, everybody? The show has begun, and I'm very happy to have you here. Thanks for coming here, for stopping by my little pictorial, slightly pixelated, not that the camera is not high quality, I have a very high quality camera, but in that it is transferred to you via pixels, oasis. Welcome to my little oasis. Set up shop by the camel, by the palm tree, in the sand, there's a bench, wherever you would like to sit. How's it going? It's going good on my end. Everything's basically the same. I went to the dentist today. Nothing too exciting going on over here, except trying to escape from the omnipresent pressure of, you know what's going on. You know what's going on in life out there, but that's not why we're here right now. So I kind of just want to jump right in case it's your first time here, or you haven't been here in a while. First half, I got some stuff I want to talk to you guys about. I'm actually pretty amped to talk to you guys about this particular topic right now. And then second half, we're going to do a picture based on it, and I'll be hanging out with you here. We can talk in the chat. I got some stuff I want to talk about, but also, like I said in the pre-show, I like hanging out with you guys. So let's just pull the trigger. Did I sync the mic up to the slideshow? You know I did. You know I did, because it's real professional hours right now. So we are wrapping up Clement of Alexandria session, which is awesome. We are finishing up book 1 right now, but if you weren't here before, it doesn't matter. So just so people know, also a little meta note, on what I'm doing here. If we ever do like a series or like, we're hitting a book a few times, I'm never going to have it be the case that you had to see what came before to get something out of what we're doing now. So I just want to throw that out there. And it's going to perfectly drop us off at the next topic I want to hit next month. But for now, we're back with our friend Clement of Alexandria, and let's see what he has to say right now. So let's see, should I go into the overall topic right now? Well, basically what I was thinking when I started laying this out is we've been talking so much about, his idea of Greek philosophy as maybe prepping the Greeks to receive the gospel. And there's this really interesting idea I've come across a few times with a few early Christian guys. And people usually will just throw it out there, and I'll see it. I'll hit it like a little speed bump while I'm reading. And I'm like, wait, what? And there's a few guys who say that Plato was influenced by or got his ideas from Moses. So I've always had the reaction that you're probably having right now, where you're like, wait, what? How? And you're thinking about it, and you're like, I'm not really getting that stacking up right now. So in this end of the first book of the Stromata, Clement of Alexandria goes through this, and he talks about it. So I thought that's what we'd end up talking about this week, is like his case for it. Took a little bit of a different turn, but let's just dive right in and see what happens right now. So in the chapter we left off in, the next chapter, he traces the succession and history of Greek philosophers, saying, this guy taught this other guy who taught this guy. It's a ton of names and people that people don't normally know. I'd only heard of like a handful of them, and it goes on for like 3, 4, 5 pages. So we're not going to go into that. But I wanted to poke into something here that he mentions near the end. And basically, the first little part of what I'm saying right now and introducing to you right now is his setup for the discussion of, Plato and Moses and all that stuff. That's why I'm going into it. But I did hit a nice little cool anecdote right here that I thought would be great to start off with. And so while he's going through, he mentions this guy named Thales. It could be Thales, but I think it's Thales. And him predicting an eclipse. And this is really cool for us to just make note of in terms of taking a large survey of weird, mystical, interesting phenomena in general. Because this supposedly happened in 585 BC. That's when scholars say it happened. And it is supposed to be the first predicted eclipse in recorded history, when this guy named Thales predicted this eclipse happening. And I wanted to make a note of this here because this ties into a really interesting, for me, theory that I kind of picked up from a few slightly crazy people, but I think it is legitimate, about how information and knowledge inherently dovetails with power, especially when that information and knowledge is kept secret. So in this story, these older philosophical stories, in case you don't normally go into this stuff, it's always a little hard to tell how much it literally happened versus became a story over time. So I'm just going to give you the story version of it that I know. This guy Thales, there was this war between the Medians, maybe it's Medians, and the Lydians. And this war was going on for years and years. And Thales really didn't want this war to be going on. And he was one of the only guys around, maybe the only guy around that could predict eclipses. And he saw this eclipse was coming up imminently. So he came to the generals and said, if you guys don't stop this war is angering the gods, and the sun will be blocked out if you don't stop. And then, right after that, the sun was blocked out, and they both stopped having the war because they were so scared that this predicted ominous event happened. So I thought that was a really interesting note to hit, because we're not going to go fully down this road right now, but that model shows you how when you survey all different civilizations all over the world, when things get going, the usual model, in my opinion, is some type of priestly class or a group of people that have some kind of secret knowledge, and then that non-coincidentally dovetails with the power structure, the kings, the warlords, whoever's ruling, and things like that. This is a really great spot to land on because it's not difficult to imagine in any culture, in any time, or any civilization, if you could predict when an eclipse was going to happen, you would have that ability of coming out. It's not hard to imagine someone in Aztec culture or Mayan culture coming out to a bunch of people who have no knowledge of mathematics or astronomy and saying, look, I can block out the sun, boom, and then an eclipse happens, and all of a sudden you're this priestly king warlord. In my opinion, that's probably how a lot of power consolidated in early civilizations, aside from obviously warlords killing each other. And it also explains why wherever you go, Tibet, Sumer, Egypt, Mesopotamia, Central America, literally anywhere, you have that structure I described. A priestly caste keeping secret information synced up with whoever happens to be running the nation at the time. kind of a detour, but I thought that was cool enough for me to mention, and maybe something you could look into also. Anyway, so for this whole first chapter, he's laying out the history of the philosophers and what kings ruled over them. His point being, what he's getting to, these philosophers aren't really that old. Moses is way older. That's the whole point, basically. There's one other idea I wanted to give over to you. You know, part of this is sort of a meta-analysis of how we look at like esoterica or even just weird old theology things or just religion in general. But it's going to be really helpful in your mind if you split these two categories, which seem to be the same thing, but actually they are different. When you're looking into anything like this, let's say Pythagoras or Kabbalah or even just early theology, maybe even just Moses stuff, doesn't really matter. You're going to have on one hand, on the left side, we have the actual history of it, how it actually developed, how it was passed down, who it went through, the actual literal real history. But then on the right side, you have the history of the history of it. That sounds kind of meta, but what that means basically is that you're always going to have these two separate things. If you poke into like Pythagoras, for example, on the left side, there's scholastic interpretations of where his ideas came from, who he got influenced by. But on the right side, you're going to find people within the tradition, and you want to see what they thought about it. Whether it's true or not, it's totally separate from the actual history. So Pythagoras is a perfect example. If you poke into some Pythagorean philosophers, they'll say, Pythagoras learned this from Egypt. Did it actually come from Egypt? Well, I don't know, maybe. But it's just going to be helpful as we go along if you split those two things. Because basically for the whole rest of this, we're going into the right side. We're going into, this is what Clement of Alexandria says about the heritage of all these ideas. So every time I go into anything for this whole thing, I'm not going to say, this is just what Clement of Alexandria says. We don't know if it's actually true. It's interesting because we want to see what the history of these ideas are, what people thought about the ideas and where they came from. But that's just something that I think in your mind it would be helpful to split apart. Anyway, so basically he is going on and on about, you know, this idea came from this culture, this idea came from this culture, and kind of just setting up the idea that Greece was influenced by all these cultures that came outside of it, non-Greek philosophers. This guy's Phrygian, this guy's Phoenician, this guy invented this instrument and he's Egyptian, this guy invented this thing and he's actually a Canaanite, this guy invented, and just going through to set up the idea that Greeks was influenced by the outside and what came before them. And he's basically doing this to lay the framework for his idea that Plato was influenced by Moses. There are a cool few little anecdotes in here. One of the nice things about going through these old compendium books, and part of why I initially started doing it, is that there's things in these books that we only have because they're preserved in these texts. So in Clement of Alexandria here, this other guy Eusebius that we're going to go into at another time, there's fragments of things and quotes and people that are referenced that are only preserved because these guys mention them offhand. So aside from the actual information, it's pretty cool to go through and just, you know, see what anecdotes they're kind of just throwing out there. He had a few cool ones. He mentioned this Roman king named Numa, who he said was a Pythagorean and also was influenced by the laws of Moses, and therefore he prohibited his people from making an image of God in any human form. He also, this was really surprising, came out of like just total left field for me, but he straight up mentions Buddha by name. He says, you're just going along, and he says, some too of the Indians obey the precepts of Buddha, whom, on account of his extraordinary sanctity, they have raised to divine honors. That was really surprising for me. You got to keep in mind, Clement of Alexandria, you know, we're in like 150 to 225 AD. So I guess on the one hand, it's not really surprising that they would know who Buddha was. Maybe some people know, but when Alexander the Great conquered as far east as he did, some people recorded these figures called gymnosophists, like naked wise men. So they knew of some Indian philosophers and some Indian things. But it was just interesting that he mentions Buddha, and the way he mentions it, he doesn't say it like, there's this guy in India who is named Buddha, and he just says, yeah, Buddha, you know, the Indians think he's really holy. So I thought that was interesting, just a cool note for me, especially given my history and background. He talks about some German women who are called sacred women, who did a form of what's called hydromancy. That's where you stare into water or listen to rivers and tell the future from that. And apparently they even decided when German battalions and men could like go into battle in antiquity and ancient times. He also mentions an author named Megasthenes, who says that All that was said about nature by the ancients was also said by those whose philosophies come from beyond Greece. Some things by the Brahmins among the Indians, and others by those called Jews in Syria. In case people don't know, Brahmin is like an Indian priest, basically. So, again, he's just building this case of like, yeah, Greece is influenced by outside stuff. It doesn't just all come from Greece, to build up his case. And it goes on like this for a while. This guy invented this thing, so on and so forth. Jumping ahead, there's a chapter. I'm going to mention some of the chapter titles just because they perfectly summarize the points he's making in there. This one's called The Jewish Institutions and Laws of Far Higher Antiquity Than the Philosophy of the Greeks. In here, he dates Moses via this Egyptian guy, and then goes on to date a bunch of other things and line up all these dates to see which is older. If you've gone into any older theology stuff, you might know that's like super common. That's just my amateur opinion. But you'll find people get really obsessed with calculating dates, like, oh, this king ruled for 87 years, and this king ruled for 83 years, and this must be when Solomon was, it was this year, and then building it up. So he basically just builds this huge timeline. And he also, interestingly enough, in here mentions a lot of deities from Greece or Egypt as though they were real people who lived and did great things and then became deified. So as you're reading along in here, he mentions, Atlas or Dionysus or Hercules, or people that the average person would probably think of as 100% divine Greek gods. And he mentions them as real people who did something great and then became deified. I thought that was an interesting note on how it's written in his view of ancient religion and things like that. So there's a ton of number crunching in here, comparing dates. Maybe that's something we'll poke into later if we want to, obsess out and make a whole cohesive timeline. But his whole point is that Moses is older than all this Greek stuff. In a later chapter, he takes the Greek translation of the Old Testament, it's called the Septuagint, as more evidence that Plato was influenced by Moses. His point being, God had this text translated into Greek, making it a kind of preparatory prophecy for the Greeks as well, and Plato would have obviously read it. It's in Greek, right? This is an interesting note in terms of what I talked about before, where, there's the actual history and then the history of the received history. Got to come up with a better term for that that's more clear. But modern scholars, and they're probably right, say the Septuagint, that Greek translation of the Old Testament, actually came after Plato, like a lot after, like hundreds and hundreds of years after. But you can imagine being Clement of Alexandria on the ground, and you're living in Alexandria and you see the Old Testament in Greek and you're thinking, well, yeah, this must be really old, right? Obviously. But it actually wasn't that old. So it's just kind of an interesting note there. He could have been wrong about that, or I guess modern scholars are wrong, one or the other. He also quotes a few philosophers who made that tie-in between Plato and Moses. There's a guy named Aristobulus who writes, "And Plato followed the laws given to us and had manifestly studied all that is in them," talking about the Mosaic laws. He also quotes a guy named Numenius. Numenius comes up a good amount in things like this. You can remember he's a Pythagorean philosopher because his name's Numenius, which sounds like number. And Numenius says, this is a famous quote if you poke into a lot of this stuff. He said, "For what is Plato but Moses speaking in Attic Greek?" So he thought Plato was just straight up a Greek version of Moses. So overall, like I said in the beginning, I thought we'd go into his case for why Plato is influenced by Moses, but that's basically it, everything I just told you. He somewhat understandably says, well, A, Moses is the oldest of all this stuff around. B, it's in Greek. And C, there's some kind of similarities that boil down to, in my opinion, Plato and Moses both having some conception of order and laws and the divine, and from there he makes the leap to, so obviously Plato would have read Moses and is influenced by him. I'm not totally convinced. I'm going to be really honest with you, just off the cuff. I'm not totally convinced, but I do think it's a really, really cool idea. It's really fun for me to step over into that view where Plato read Moses and then later has this like resurgence of ideas based on like reading Genesis or something. So I don't think that's true necessarily, but it is kind of cool to think about. Maybe eventually I'll get convinced. If someone feels strongly and wants to convince me, hit me up. I could probably be very easily convinced. So the thing is, while getting this together, it made me think about Moses a lot as a figure. And I have this feeling sometimes, maybe you have this too, I think it's probably part of having like an active spiritual life that dovetails with this larger system that's ultimately beyond your minuscule comprehension. And I was thinking about Moses, and I had this feeling, the last time I got this feeling was with Saint Joseph, Jesus's, earthly father. And I was reading all this stuff about Saint Joseph, and he's this divine, like, earthly father figure. And I just had this moment of like, wow, yeah, I never really thought about Saint Joseph. I never really thought about him. You know, he's kind of just been there in the story for me personally. Like, maybe I'm just dumb, but I never really unpacked it and really got into who he was and thought about it. He's just been there in the paintings and in the writing, but I never really thought about it. And I got that feeling a little bit with Moses. I was like, wow, you know, he's just kind of there. And maybe it's because I've seen him in movies or TV shows, which is like a horrifying thought. But I was like, I should like dust that off a little bit because he's actually a really awesome, interesting guy. And just reading this made me start thinking about him in a new way. So for this last little chunk here, I want to go into what Clement of Alexandria says about Moses because it's pretty cool. He says Moses was originally from a Chaldean family. That's C-H-A-L-D, Chaldean, in case anyone has never heard that word before and wants to look into it. Says he was born in Egypt. And this is a cool connection. Maybe some people are 100 trillion% familiar with this, but some people aren't. There it was ordered by the Pharaoh that all the male children be destroyed. So in a way, Clement says, Moses is a type of Christ. The way Herod ordered all the destruction of the male children when Jesus was an infant, the same thing happened to Moses. And he's put in a basket, and he's found later. Clement says that's where his name comes from. He says M-O-U, Mo, is the Egyptian word for water. And when he was found, they gave him the name meaning one who has breathed on being taken from the water. Interestingly, so now we're jumping off. He says Moses' family had already given him a name before he got the name Moses. So he got the Moses name tag, which was Joachim. Joachim. So I'm reading that and I'm like, wow, that's crazy. I never heard that before. And then he says later in heaven, Moses got a third name, that name being Melchi, M-E-L-C-H-I. His source here is, quote, as the mystics say, but I just thought it was definitely cool enough for me to mention. Wait, I just lost my place. Oh yeah. So the other interesting angle here that I hadn't really considered that much before is he said at the proper age, he learned all of the arts, music, geometry, everything. A lot of this is from a guy named Philo. It's a famous historian. He has a book called Life of Moses, but it's also in Scripture. So in Acts 7:22, it says, Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. I thought that was really awesome and definitely kind of, like I said, made me reconsider the archetype, the figure of Moses. A philosopher named Eupolemus called him the first wise man. So I really like this sort of reconfiguring in my mind of Moses as this super wise man who was instructed in all the high arts of civilization by Egyptian royalty. Clement even specifically says that he, quote, learned the philosophy which is conveyed... Oh, I went too far. Learned the philosophy which is conveyed by symbols, which they point out in the hieroglyphical inscriptions. So he even would have learned Egyptian religion, theoretically, which is also kind of a trip to think about the pyramids and Egyptian religion being codified in these hieroglyphics and via the priestly class there, and Moses learning the ins and out of Egyptian religion and then going on to live the life that he led. I thought that was really awesome and something I never even considered, honestly. Clement also says, the mystics say he slew the Egyptian by word only. And he ties that into the scene in Acts where Peter is talking to a woman about the price of a field and she lies. And when he calls her out on it, she dies. He says Moses slew the Egyptian by word only, just like Peter ended up slaying this woman by word only. I actually left my book on the floor over here, so hold up 1 second because I just want to read something out of here. So... Oh yeah, there's also all these other crazy stories about Moses, so I'm just going to read one out of here because part of the fun of this is going through the older tales about it. And so Artapanus, in his work on the Jews, relates, quote, that Moses, being shut up in custody by Chenephrez, king of the Egyptians, on account of the people demanding to be let go from Egypt, the prison being opened by night, by the interposition of God, he went forth, and reaching the palace, stood before the king as he slept, and aroused him. And that the latter, struck with what had taken place, bade Moses tell him the name of the God who had sent him. And Moses, bending forward, told him in his ear, and that the king on hearing it fell speechless, but being supported by Moses, was revived again. So there's all these cool, must be just crazy, honestly, weird, mystical stories floating around at that time that he documented, but I really like that one too, about Moses, like, being locked in prison and God letting him out and him having this weird interaction with the Pharaoh. Anyway, getting back on track, we'll wrap this up and get to picture making. He even says the Greeks received knowledge of kingship and generalship from Moses. For this, he cites what in my view is some cases I would say are kind of a stretch, but just so you know, his logic is basically, well, Moses was leaving Egypt and he did this, and later a Greek general did something that was kind of similar, so obviously that Greek general must have learned it from studying Moses. Not kind of a stretch for me, but just letting you know. One of the coolest ones for me was this story where some Greek generals are guided by these pillars of light or pillars of fire in the distance, and he ties this into, obviously, the book of Numbers, where Moses is led by a pillar of cloud and fire, and says it's kind of this prefiguring of the Greeks converting to Christianity. But that was a pretty cool parallel, honestly. Anyway, I really like this quote about Moses, kind of sums it all up. He says, Moses was a type of living law, governed by the benign word. It's a pretty cool quote. Anyway, the last few chapter titles will give you an idea of how he closes this little thing out. I'll just read a few of them to you. Moses, rightly called a divine legislator, and though inferior to Christ, far superior to the great legislators of the Greeks, Minos and Lycurgus. The next chapter. The law, even in correcting and punishing, aims at the good of men. Next chapter. The Greeks are but children compared with the Hebrews. So you probably get the picture. Before the end, he has a chapter on the fourfold division of the Mosaic law, where he leads off with saying, the Mosaic philosophy is divided into 4 parts. And I'm kind of painting a whole picture here, but I just really like that phrasing. Maybe again, because everyone has like their blind spots, but I never really thought of Moses as a philosopher. I mean, of course, his work has a philosophical element, but just that phrase, the Mosaic philosophy, really got me thinking about him in a totally different way. And I'm kind of excited to go back to like the Old Testament books and kind of think about the figure behind him. In case people don't know, some people might not know, according to most received traditions, Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Old Testament. So Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, he wrote those books according to received wisdom, I'll say. And to not leave you hanging, last thing we'll hit right now is, so he says the fourfold Mosaic philosophy. What is it? He says the first part is historic, the history. Next part is legislative, the rules. Both of those come together to form a kind of ethical worldview, an ethical treatise, you could say. Then there's sacrificial. It's all about sacrifice. Clement says that this is a lead-in to the study of physical sciences. And finally, above them all, he calls theology, which he also names vision. Thought that was kind of awesome. And of course, within theology, he says that's what's passed on later to the Greeks. He even said that this branch theology is what Aristotle called metaphysics. It's kind of an interesting tie-in there. And that's basically it. So I'm going to throw this book down over here. I'm going to throw the camera on. So it kind of took a turn there because, like I said, I thought that I would be giving you this argument about how Moses influenced Plato, because I have heard that a lot. Maybe I just poke into like weird topics, but I have heard people say that a lot and different authors say that. I knew it was a case people made, but it seems like, just a little bit of recap before we make our picture here, that Clement of Alexandria basically just deduces it from his own logical reasoning. That Moses is old, Plato's less old, therefore Plato probably read Moses. So I don't know if you're convinced. If anyone hardcore 100% thinks that, I'm very open to you convincing me. Because I wasn't convinced. I wanted to be convinced. I wanted to step into that world, but I didn't. But anyway, so I'm going to see what people are saying in the chat, and we're going to transfer over to our picture-making situation right now. And I was thinking, let's see what people said in the chat. Someone said, hydromancy is still a Germanic thing. Look up Waterloo-Pobos in the Netherlands. Yeah, maybe I will. I normally, I'm not so spending my time trying to master the divinatory arts anymore, but I definitely will check it out. Someone said, Larry Johnson saying that Moses knew all the arts of Egypt. That is Freemasonry. Like yesterday, so this is fun. Oh, is he that guy that's always tweeting stuff like that? Interesting. Oh, yeah, and I guess that is an interesting tie-in. So if you pick up a book, like by, just to make the difference between the received history and the actual history really clear and why it's important to like keep that distinction. So a book, if that guy mentioned that, he probably read this book. It's called The Secret Teaching of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. And that book is all about where Freemasonry comes from, but it's from the perspective of a Freemason. This is just my opinion. I really can't imagine this would be controversial here, but I don't read things by Freemasons, mostly because when you join, you take an oath not to tell anyone exactly what's going on. So, like, in my mind, why would I read it except for the second reason I said, unless I'm specifically poking into what they think instead of the actual history, if that makes sense. Anyway, so I got the chat up here. If anyone wants to say anything, you have to tag me, people writing Addo and Cyclops. But I want to jump into our picture here. And so think about everything we just talked about, everything we just discussed. I was thinking we could jump in and do an image of, I don't know if we'll make an image of Moses in particular, but I was thinking about the archetype of like the great ancient teacher. So I kind of want to just explore that a little bit. Maybe it'll be an image of Moses. Maybe not. But let's see. I'm going to throw this down right over here. There's a crazy delay on my camera, but I think it's fine. I mean, why would it matter? I guess it doesn't matter, right? Cool. So let's see. We've been starting with brown the whole time. Should we keep it moving with the brown lines? It is a really good look. We could change it up. I think brown is good. Somehow brown fits like the Old Testament feeling. So let's just start with that. And I have some idea of how I want this to look, but I'm not actually totally sure, honestly. Manly P. Hall was a Freemason. I'm pretty sure. I would be surprised if he wasn't, but I've been wrong about things before. Someone can check me on that. So I'm starting with burnt umber. This is like basically the darkest brown that I have. Burnt, so it's red. It's kind of a warm brown. And let's see, we've been going with the full, we did the full figure outline like 2 shows ago where it's the line and then the head and coming down over here. So I don't know if we'll do that again, but let's see, how do I want to do it then? Do I want him like floating? I kind of want to get the beard in. Let's use that kind of like Moses-y figure that I had laid out there. We'll leave a little room above him just to, and hold up, I'm just going to move the camera because the delay is like crazy distracting for me. Cool. So I'm just going to throw down the head. And maybe it's because I saw that image I made last year when I was traveling across the plains, but the brown with the long beard was just such a good look. So let's see. Spoonie said, okay, so he became a Freemason after his book was published by about 30 years. That's interesting. I'll look into that. I'll see. I'm not saying, you know, the book should be like burned or something. I was just using it as an example. And let's just go for the long beard here. I'm going to come up like this. Come down over here. And I feel like when I do beards, I kind of have 2 options. I can either make them just totally straight, or I can start to get these little like tucky folds in there. That's what I'm going to do right now. Cool. I could even have it tucked back behind. Let's do it. I never do that, so let's try that. Have it coming up this way. Perfect. Makes it kind of look like a fatter, like more substantial beard, you know? If you ever look at like Orthodox priests or something, you notice their beards grow differently. Some guys have like the wide beard. Some guys have the thin, narrow beard. Sometimes it fans out. It fans out like a trapezoid. And let's see, if we're going to throw a gradient down, do we want the dark part to be on the top or the dark part to be on the bottom? Because it kind of makes more thematic sense if the dark part's on top. And it kind of fades down as it goes down. So let's see. That looks pretty good. It's not really very dark at all, though, actually. Perfect. Let's see how much we can make it fade out as we come down. I suppose I could have made it gray, but I didn't really think to. I could come back in with the gray. I could try and jerry-rig some gray quickly right now, but I'm not going to do it. Let's see. I can just pull the color down, and one of the strengths of the gouache is doing this kind of gradient, where you can see the whole character of the color as it goes all the way down. Perfect. Cool. Looks pretty good. It's a little dark up here, honestly, but we'll kind of just roll for it. Maybe we'll give him hair. I was going to make him bald, but maybe we'll give him hair to balance out how dark that is. Someone said, Manly P. Hall wrote a book, How to Understand Your Bible. How much more cursed could it get? That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of the occulty guys really are really into interpreting the Bible, obviously. So we'll throw these inward-looking eyes. Like he's looking inward. I could have made one open and one closed, but I didn't. And instead of just doing the straight, like, naked, round head, so we'll give him some hair. Moses isn't that old throughout the whole Bible. He must have been like a young guy at some point. A young guy with a huge beard. It's thematic. It's symbolic. Don't worry about it. All right, so I'll throw this down over here. And then let's use a different color for his robe. What color would it be? He's in Egypt. He can't be like too bright. Maybe like a dark red. Maybe like a crimson. Let's see how this crimson looks. Somehow that feels nice and deserty. And I'm kind of stoked about how we left off here because I have been thinking a lot about the Egyptian stuff. So I think next we're going to jump into the Egyptian stuff. Anyway, though. So while I was thinking about all the Moses stuff, I was thinking about Genesis. And, I mean, that's got to be, like, literally one of the deepest texts ever written. Every time I come back to that, there's just always, like, more and more. I'm sure some other people feel that way. So let's see. We'll have one arm. You know, it's also funny. I was thinking about this today. I don't know if people are familiar with the image of, like, Baphomet. Not to make a huge leap right now, but don't go look it up if you're not familiar with it. Don't put it in your brain on my account. But let's see. I got a note card right here. So, like, what I always lament is that in that pose, I'm not going to draw him, obviously. He has one arm up, and he has the other arm down like this. And it's used in a ton of, like, occult stuff, like occult, like black magic-y, not occult, like just esoteric. And it's so annoying because when I'm thinking thematically and symbolically of how to pose people, this is often like a perfect pose. To have them pointing one finger up, not pointing, maybe just their hands, and one finger down. Like, you know, it's communicating between, like, the heavens and the earth. But then it just looks like Baphomet. Ruined. And I could say, well, I'm not going to let them take it, but it kind of already... They kind of already got there before me. So we'll make it work. So we'll have one arm coming out this way. Let's see how much we can push the fold thing. You don't have too many folds, but sometimes it's a good look. And we'll just have him in this red robe that comes down here like that. Perfect. And I'll put in the other arm just so we can get to coloring in the robe. Perfect. We'll come down here. We'll go kind of oddly graphic. Maybe most people can't tell because I'm the one making the image, but I like to vary a little bit between styles. And sometimes when I think about the old stuff, I really do think about making it a little flatter, a little more punchy colors. We'll see. Nice. And I love when you get these lines where they fade up. Someone said, an ex of mine had a wallpaper of Baphomet on her phone. Yeah, that's intense, dude. That's intense. That's how you know you're cooking with some serious stuff. Anyway, so we'll throw down this red. I've been using a lot of red in my images. I guess maybe because I've been painting a little bit more off the show, just to, you know, keep things fresh and keep things moving. And somehow the pigment makes me rethink, you know, the symbolism of the colors a lot more. Maybe it's because I'm seeing them so fresh and intensely. I also noticed that it's easier for me to paint for a long period of time than it is to work on the computer for a long period of time. I guess that shouldn't be too surprising, but I did notice it. And let's see, I don't want it to be just totally pink all the way through. So I'm going to come in and drop this red. This is alizarin crimson, so it will actually be crimson. But obviously within the Christian stuff, within our theological universe, I always think of red as representing passion, both in the archaic sense and in the modern sense. Obviously red roses, that's like a hallmark of my art now. Not just my art, but Christian art in general. Represent the passion, right? Like Jesus' passion. But I think it kind of goes out from there and also represents passion in like a wider context. I guess I could have put him in a purple robe. Purple represents like wisdom and kingliness, but I'm always scared to use the purple pigments, to be honest with you. Like when I drop down one of these traditional pigments, one of these quote-unquote actual pigments, alizarin crimson, this is a real thing from the earth that is this color. But the purple colors I have, they're so chemical-y, and I'm always scared to use them. Maybe we will drop one in, see if we can make it work. But it looks chemical. I'm thinking of the dioxazine violet I have. I could mix a red and blue, but I didn't. Someone said, what's your opinion on Rene Guénon and his perennial traditionalism? Yo, that's really interesting, man. Yeah, it's funny because there are some traditionalist people on Twitter, and I think they kind of don't like me. It's nothing to do with the worldview, and they're cool. I'm just joking around. But I used to kind of like make fun of traditionalism a little bit, just because you're on Twitter and you make fun of things. This looks pretty good, but let's see if we can get this red color down here a little bit more. And I want to get that shine out of his eye. There you go. That's what it really looks like. I think that there's aspects to traditionalism that have validity for sure. I mean, what have I done the last like 3 shows about? About the idea of Greek philosophers presaging or like prefiguring or like prepping their civilization to receive Christianity. But I really don't like the label of traditionalism because I'm going to paint his hand with the staff while I'm talking. I feel like the way, it's probably not giving it a fair hearing, but I feel like the way it functions from what I've seen normally, maybe for normal people, maybe someone who's traditionalist would say, yeah, for dumb people, but whatever. So I'm going to put his hand in here, and I'm going to get the thumb coming up and then the hand coming back. Perfect. Is that I feel like the caricature of traditionalism would be, yeah, it's all legit. Like you survey everything from all corners of the world, Hinduism, Buddhism, all the different forms of Buddhism, Islam, Zoroastrianism, everything. You survey everything, and you're like, yeah, this all is kind of pointing at the same thing. And I know that's probably not an accurate like philosophical hearing out of it, but I just feel like that's the vibe, to be honest with you. And for that reason, I really dislike engaging with it. Like if I start to read something that's coming from this kind of like perennialist, traditionalist perspective, it's kind of like I stick my hackles up, like a cat. Like I stick my the hair on the back of my neck up, and I get this like tense feeling because I want to be like, wait, what about this? And wait, what about this? And wait, what about this? And I really don't feel like all the religions. I'm gonna throw this down. I'm kind of not sure if I should use this color or not, but I'm gonna do it anyway. This is raw sienna, so it's gonna be like a woody color. He has a wooden staff. Let's see if it works out though. I really don't feel like all the religions have a seed of commonality among them. I haven't extensively gone into. Oh shit! My computer's gonna die. Fuck. Wow, that was really scary. Cool. Season 1 moment. Remember on Season 1 that happened? Sorry, I'm really trying to be professional. I'm also really trying to not curse, but I just got the notification that my computer was going to die. Anyway. So yeah, I haven't fully gone into his work, and I couldn't like hardcore critique it, but in general, that's kind of the vibe I get from perennialism, and for that reason, I just don't really feel like it's a useful label for my work, and deep down, I don't think that the religions are pointing at a seed of commonality. I really don't. I think that part of my reaction against it comes, and I know that's an oversimplification. If someone in the audience like identifies with that worldview, you're probably doing the exact same thing I said I do, where you're like, wait, that's not what it is. But I have to like surmise it in some way. And I think that really my reaction to that comes from Buddhism and comes from being part, in my worldview, part of that worldview, and then later not being it. I really don't feel like there is a commonality between all the religions. I don't feel like deep down Mahayana Buddhism and Islam are kind of like sharing this core essence. I really truly don't. And with Christianity, that's one of the hardest things for me, is when I find someone who is really into merging Buddhism and Christianity because they just don't go together. They're just incongruous, period, in my opinion. And I would love for someone to try and convince me out of it, because it would actually make my worldview a lot more, it would kind of be easier in a way, but I really don't think, I don't think that it is. I mean, I could go into it. Maybe I will a little bit, but actually I will. I'll wrap up that thought, but let's see. We got to decide what else he's doing. Let's get something above his head. I really liked that image I made where the light was kind of coming down. Maybe we'll do the light last. What else could he be holding? Moses. Oh yeah, let's pump the kind of like, just because this might not be like an image of Moses, it might be an image of like the archetypal teacher. Sometimes I like thinking through symbolism with you guys on the fly. So like, let's think about it. Teacher, instruction, wisdom, learning. What would he be holding in his other hand? We could do a book. I don't want to do that. It's a little too obvious. So learning. It could be a sphere, kind of like a globe, but not a globe. Maybe a sphere with those lines on it. Maybe he's a scribe. He's a writer also. He wrote the 5 books, so we'll have some kind of writing implement. That's perfect. That's what we'll do. So I'll throw down his hand. His hand will be open, and I'll have the item floating in his hand. So yeah, I mean, with Buddhism, it's a perfect example because I come away from, someone who, like I said, is trying to make it work and saying, deep down, Buddhism and Christianity have this similarity. It's like, wow, you wouldn't even realize how much they're getting at the same thing. And I'm like, okay, how? I mean, they're literally opposites in every way. In Buddhism, you have reincarnation, and Buddhism doesn't work without reincarnation, period. If you don't have reincarnation, then Buddhism doesn't work. Then it makes no sense to be Buddhist. If you don't believe in reincarnation, why would you be Buddhist? Literally makes no sense. What's our ancient writing implement here? I guess I'll make like a chisel, a brush. I'll make like just a kind of generic like pen thing. So Christianity, you're not reincarnated. Buddhism, you are. In Buddhism, the goal is to escape and go to nirvana. But that's not like being with God. It's like something totally different. So even in that sense, I guess I kind of made this like a brush, but it's really like a generic chisel. In that sense, they're opposites. Even morality. In Buddhism, for example, and there's obviously many, many forms of Buddhism, but within that like structure and system, there's a part, for example, in the Lotus Sutra, where Buddha tells this story and he like justifies lying basically in a very particular sense. I don't want to be unfair and be like, Buddha says it's okay to lie. It's not what I'm saying. But in the Lotus Sutra, there's a story where, it might be interesting for some people, there's a house on fire, and inside the house are some children, and the children aren't capable of understanding that the house is on fire. So the dad goes in and says, oh my God, the house is on fire. You guys got to come with me. It's really bad. Like you got to come with me right now. And they're just laughing and playing. So the dad then goes back in and says, hey, actually, if you come outside on the lawn right now, I bought you all these really great toys. There's horses and chariots and everything waiting for you on the lawn. And then the kids run out of the house and he's like, psych, but I only told you that because, you were in this burning house. And Buddha says that's what it's like being a Buddha in some ways. People don't get it, and you kind of have to like, not mislead them, but lead them via what, if you were being harsh, you could say is lying. So you could say that's justified. It's actually kind of an interesting philosophical question. But that's not congruous with like Satan being like the father of lies and stuff. You know what I mean? Anyway, I can keep going on and on and on and on. I probably do have more examples. I put this little stroke here. I thought that would be cool. But yeah, I really don't feel like they're the same or getting at a deep core unless, this is my point, so kind of why I'm rambling on, unless you strip it all the way down to, well, just be a good person, basically. You kind of have to strip any religion down to, well, just kind of do what you're supposed to do and be good, basically. And in my opinion, like, it's not really like, I don't really subscribe to that. So I haven't read his work in particular, but if you're asking me what I think about traditionalism, that's kind of my answer. Okay. That was kind of a long detour, but I've been thinking about that a lot because I've been looking at the Egyptian stuff and thinking about other religions outside Christianity. So, okay, we got to start making some moves here. Let's put in a landscape. Let's not fight the way the picture is going. It's another interesting thing. Sometimes I like talking about the sort of meta creative aspect of making an image, and sometimes you can feel it's just going in a particular direction. I was just thinking, I don't really want to put a landscape down here, but I kind of feel like it's going in that direction. So I'm just going to do it. Sometimes you let the picture direct you, and you let the picture kind of finish itself. It's another creative tip in case anyone's working on images and things like that, but you usually, one of my painting teachers told me this, you want to have more than one image going at once. So that way when the image stops speaking to you, when it stops directing you, and you hit a wall, you can just go over to the other one. Because if you keep pushing it sometimes, you might not like where you end up. Sometimes it's speaking to you and sometimes it isn't. Anyway, so we'll kind of just throw down this sandy background right over here. And I do want to throw down some like learny things. That's a technical term we use in art history. Some learny items. Some big brain learny items just to convey that aspect of him we were talking about before, where you have, him being educated by the Egyptian royalty and in the Egyptian scriptures and stuff. So we've used pyramids like a trillion freaking times. What else can we use to represent Egypt? What else says Egypt? Palm tree. I'm going to throw down a palm tree in the back. But I'll do it in brown like a silhouette so it'll look kind of classy. And if I didn't think it would look too cheesy, I would actually write some hieroglyphs. But I think it would look too cheesy. I'm not really confident in that bringing the aesthetic quality that we've all come to expect. But maybe we can hint at the Egyptian-ness in a different way. We can get a Valken. Sometimes if you paint the Valken in a certain way, it'll give you that Egyptian flavor. Maybe a feather. A feather is good. A feather will get us that Egyptian flavor. Let's do that. Throw on the silhouette of a palm tree in the back. Perfect. Perfect. Move this so there's no shine. Cool. Abacus. Abacus is pretty good. Yeah, we'll put a feather. A feather, in case people don't know, a feather is actually a sort of preeminent symbol in what color should we use? Let's use this brown is almost like hieroglyphics-y color. The feather is like a preeminent symbol in Egyptian theology. I guess I'll call it theology. And it looks kind of like this in my mind. It comes down, but it forms this little bumpy point at the bottom. And this feather is a symbol for a concept called Ma'at. Sometimes it's a goddess in Egyptian stuff. But it's M-A-A-T. I'm going to give it a little cut in here just to give it that illustrative flavor, but normally it wouldn't have that. And it's interesting because Ma'at is like this ordering principle of the universe. And maybe you've seen, I'm kind of giving away some stuff from later episodes, but whatever. There's an infinite amount of cool stuff to talk about. Maybe you've seen, but in some Egyptian imagery, you'll see someone having their heart weighed against a feather, and that feather represents the natural order of the universe. It's called Ma'at. That's why it's there. Yeah, this looks like a little hieroglyphic-y. We'll take it. We'll take it. And so we gotta start making some bold moves. It's already 7:55. Let's make some bold moves right now. Let's get a halo going on. Let's get some sky going on. We're doing the little teeny tiny brush thing, but now we're gonna cover some area right now. Halo color. This is always an interesting spot. Do we want to use typical yellow? Yeah, I called it typical, so let's say no. Let's use this red for the halo. I used red for a halo in an image the other day, and it looks really awesome. So let's do it. Kind of fits the Old Testament vibe. Blood, passion. Honestly, it just looks cool. If you make a dope piece of art and people are talking about it, you should never tell them I just did it because it looks cool, but I'm being honest with you guys. I just think the red would look cool right now. I guess you could say it's like Passover lamb, like the blood of the lamb, which is a type for Jesus, just like we covered how Moses is like a type for Jesus, but that would not really be the real reason I chose it. And I want to get this fade in. I'm trying to pump up the fades. Looks pretty good. You get kind of like a glowy effect. I saw this Japanese painting where this Buddhist teacher was floating in a bubble. And I was like, man, that bubble is really well painted. That's my life. That's what I do when I'm not doing the show with you guys. Okay, this looks dope. Well, let's get a little, let's push the color a little bit. Let's get a little, oh, someone said camel. That's good too. We'll get a little yellow in here. And I think that the other, so I'm kind of not stalling, but my brain is kind of like hitting a little bit of a wall where I'm like symbolism for teacher, and I'm poking in there and I'm like, it's not really happening. It's not really happening. So what I think we're going to do is the other idea I had on the back burner, where Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. So in the background, we'll just kind of put some symbols that relate to that. I think that would be really, really dope. So first up, so let's do it this way. We got to separate the zones just a little bit. I'm working quickly. I'd like to wrap up somewhere near on time, but you know, if we don't, I'm not gonna freak out about it. Something about this. Oh my God, it's the hard cerulean. Cerulean doesn't work. This is the good cerulean. So let's see, I'm gonna throw this up here. So something about this cerulean also with the blue gives a little bit of an Egyptian flavor. I do have a blue that I think of as Egyptian blue. Maybe we'll drop it in. So I'm gonna start working a little bit quicker and looser. And I'll mention why I think of it as Egyptian in a second. I really didn't think we'd go full Egyptian, but you know, like I said, you gotta ride the wave. Someone in the chat said, do you know of any good critiques of Zen? I know there is some debates going on between Chan Zenist and Zen Buddhist. I'm not talking about that argument though. You know, it's really funny, man, because a few people have emailed me recently asking like stuff like that. I'd like to make some videos on Buddhism. The thing is, it's really annoying to talk about Buddhism because there's so many different people using different terms in the same way. It's kind of why I normally don't ever tweet about it, is like, it's really easy for someone to come along and be like, wow, this guy thinks this thing means this, but it actually, if you look right here, means this, so this guy's stupid. And I can't write like a 200-page preface being like, yeah, I know that, I'm using it like in this context. You know, it's not like within Christian theology where you can say like, I'm Catholic and I'm using this term in this way. You know, there's like so many different terms meaning like so many different things. So I'm gonna throw down that Egyptian blue on the other side. I'm looking for this color. It's called phthalo blue, and it always reminds me of the, let's see, spectrum violet primary, cobalt, Prussian blue. Prussian blue is the color. It always reminds me of the these things called ushaptis, this like material called faience. I'm pretty sure it's like baked quartz or something, but the Egyptians would get this like very powerful stain of blue in their artifacts. If you go to any museum that has Egyptian stuff, you'll see it there. Let's see if we can get that going on here. Since we talked about Moses in the basket with the water, and it kind of fits with Genesis, let's just throw down some water here. And I'll pull this color down. It's also kind of, you know, arrogant for me to be like, here's why this huge belief system is totally wrong. But obviously I do have some like qualms with it personally. But we'll see. I don't know. Oh, wait, but you asked me a question. Do I know about any arguments against it in particular? Well, it depends on what perspective you're coming from. I mean, the issue would be like, if you're Christian, then the thing is that at best, the best thing you're going to get from it is like emptying your mind and like learning how to observe your mind's processes unfolding or something. But as like an ultimate spiritual path, I mean, the thing is that it would be incompatible with Christianity. I mean, that's basically it. But as like a mind training tool, I guess you could kind of like get away with it. Look at this blue. This is nice. This actually isn't the really chemically blue I was thinking of. It has this nice like dark flavor. I never really went that hard on the Zen Buddhist stuff. I was like aware of it, but it's not like my field. But I had a friend that was really into it. I read a few books. I found that the guy that I liked the most when I was doing Zen Buddhist stuff, whenever I mentioned him to other Buddhist people and Zen people, they'd be like, oh my God, that guy's the worst. It's really funny. It's this guy named Shunryu Suzuki. When you were more into Buddhism, were you into Mahayana, Theravada, Zen, or specifically some other thing? Do you think you can separate Zen from religion and see it from a philosophical perspective? That's interesting. I'm going to throw a basket down over here while we're talking. Well, yeah, actually, I mean, that's the thing, you know, with the meditation stuff. So the reason that I liked the guy that I just mentioned, it's going to be ambiguous if this is like a basket or a boat over here. I'll bring the light a little bit closer. With the guy I liked, his name's Shunryu Suzuki, and he had a book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. There's actually only one video of him, and it's on YouTube. It might be worth checking out just because he's this really like mystical, weirdo Japanese guy, and in the video, it's not like he's pumping like any like hardcore Buddhist theology. But Anyway, the thing he was into is this thing called Zazen, where you're literally like, to oversimplify it, you're literally just sitting. So you just sit there and observe. We're gonna go over because it's 8 o'clock, and I guess somewhere along the way I miscalculated. So I don't know if anyone has a problem with it. You can write to my manager, but we'll go over a little bit. So yeah, what I'm going to do right now while I'm talking is maybe just drop a few things from Genesis up here, but I do want to like answer your question because it's interesting. So yeah, he wrote this book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, Zazen, just sitting meditation, right, picking up where I left off. I'm looking for the black. I can't find any of my colors. I'm like blind. I'm looking right, oh, it's right here. So yeah, and the thing I liked about it, honestly, was that it's basically divorced from any larger cosmology. You're literally, I don't want to say, like, do it. I don't want to say, like, this is a good spiritual road to go down, if I'm just speaking off the cuff, though. What I liked about it was that you're literally just sitting there and observing your mind. He talks about, you're sitting there, and if a thought comes in, you don't entertain the thought. You don't put out food for it. The thought's just there, and that's basically it. And then you watch it leave, and you're like literally just watching your mind. In that way, I think that there is some meditation stuff that I would say personally, I'm not qualified to give spiritual advice, but I would say personally falls into the domain of like yoga. Yoga is a perfect example. Like, is yoga in and of itself? Like, if you're just going there and stretching and kind of like exercising purely, is that like evil or bad? No, it's bad. Not that it's bad, but what is bad about it, if there is something bad about it, in my opinion, is that people go and then you get the spiritual cosmology also when you're not expecting it. You go being like, oh, I'm just going to do yoga. And then everyone here has some level of metacognition. They can think about like their life in like some capacity. But some people can't, honestly. And then a normal random person is just going to do yoga and they're getting hit with like, Hinduism or Buddhism when they didn't really expect it, and then they get roped into it. And then I'm not saying that is in and of itself like, you know what I'm saying. It's like it functions, whether it's good or bad, as like a Trojan horse, kind of. So I think the meditation thing is interesting too, because to answer the other question, I think the same person asked, I was mostly into Tibetan Buddhism. So that is really, really, really interesting in terms of what I'm talking about, because what Tibetan Buddhism really is, like, fundamentally. I'm going to put like a vine in here. I want to put a plant for like Genesis, but I think like a vine would just be cool poking in. So Tibetan Buddhism is basically like I'm not trying to plug it. I don't want to like talk shit about it, but I'm not trying to plug it. I just have to give that caveat, because whenever I talk about it, I make it sound cool. I don't want to be responsible for someone like going down a certain road that I'm not trying to pump. So that's my little caveat. But basically, it's a fusion of Indian Buddhism and Central Asian shamanism. And what Tibetan Buddhism is, so you asked if it was like Mahayana or whatever, technically it's something called Vajrayana. And in case people don't know anything about what I'm talking about right now, there's different like schools of Buddhism. You would call it like the different turnings of the wheel. But basically what that means is like Vajrayana, what you would want to know about it is that it's all about getting enlightened in one lifetime. So it's kind of like the crazy rocket science of Buddhism that's designed to not have you live hundreds of lives over and over and over. You're going to get enlightened this lifetime. You're going to do it now. You're going to do some weird stuff, but it's going to work, and that's basically it. So it was really funny because I'd be hanging out in certain places, and like, I'm weirdo esoterica guy. Hello, everyone's here, right? So it's kind of a funny story. So you go to these places, and I'm like on board. I'm like, yeah, like letters are kind of magic. I'm going to get some like mantra. It's kind of like a magic formula, basically. There's these weird deities, like this horse-headed god and like all this stuff. And at the time I was like, yo, I'm down, man. Like, I'm down. There's this guru. Maybe he's reincarnated. Like, I don't know. Like, I was 100% on board. But what's funny is that you also get people in there who are coming for what I described initially. They're like, oh, Buddhism. That's like sitting on a pillow and like meditating, and that's basically it, right? So I would have these like soccer moms literally in these like meditation studios with me, and you're literally getting this like printout paper with like Tibetan letters, and you're getting this like empowerment from this guru or something, and we're talking about like the Tibetan equivalent of like weird fairies and like pagan creatures and all this stuff. And I'd look over and there'd be like some soccer mom looking at this like printout of like Tibetan writing, and I'd be like, yo, there's literally No reason for you to be here, lady. You are confused. Like, this is not what you want. So that was really funny. I forget exactly what the question was, but it was really funny. And that discongruous jump happened a lot. Like, you know, you're like, your friend's like, hey, Buddhism, like, help me chill out a lot. Like, you should check it out. And then they just Google, like, Buddhist center, and they end up at a Tibetan Buddhist center. And then they're like, okay, so today's puja offering is going to be to the horse-headed deity Hayagriva. And we're going to, you know, they're like, what? Anyway, it's kind of a funny story. But yeah, I was more into that, and basically to answer the other part of the question, since I guess I kind of went down the road of talking about like other religions and stuff in a way. I don't think it's like 100% like, this is a very delicate issue. I don't think of it as like, I'm a pretty reasonable guy. I don't look at it and I'm like, trash, everything done under this umbrella is trash forever. But I disagree with like the cosmology and like philosophical underpinnings. Like I could articulate what I disagree with about, you know, the Buddhist system and stuff, but that doesn't mean that like every single thing they've ever said about anything is like garbage that needs to be like burned or something. You know what I mean? It's like a pretty reasonable perspective. Okay. So wait, let's zoom in a little bit here. So we got this going on. I kind of want to, let's see, let's think about, we can really get like one more big thing in here. I'm going to pencil in some, not pencil in, but I'm just going to throw in a little sky. I got this black thing here because I was thinking about Genesis, like separating the light from the dark. It's kind of what I was thinking. And then I got this vine up here because I was thinking, you know, we mentioned Moses being a type of Christ and the vine being a symbol for Jesus, but also like Genesis, God making plants and stuff like that. It's kind of what I was thinking there. This is a very free-form image, a little bit less tight than we normally, tight isn't controlled than we normally do, but I think that's cool. Let's come down here. Perfect. Well, let's see. Let's get something dope over here. This is looking pretty cool. Well, oh yeah, we wanted to talk about Moses as like a scholar, like we were talking about in the beginning. So I'm going to get some kind of like geometrical measuring type thing that communicates that aspect of it. And it's going to balance out this circle. I'm going to throw down a sphere. I don't want to throw down too many of like the Platonic solids because then it reads as the Platonic solids. But I feel like a sphere is good. A sphere is kind of like the preeminent symbol for just math learning in general, knowledge of mathematics in general. You know, we'll put something through its axis like this. Maybe we'll get a few more of these rings going on just to communicate. More than one theologian has said a sphere is the most suitable shape for divine things. So, kind of makes sense thinking about divinity. You're going to poke into like shape world a little bit. That looks pretty good. Maybe we'll shade it a little bit. Isidore said, I find it interesting that Taoism never mentioned birth reincarnation in its ancient texts. It was a Buddhist import. In my view, Taoism shares more than Christianity than it does with Buddhism. Well, yeah, you probably know there's that book, Christ the Eternal Tao by Hiram Monk Damascene, that's all about that. It's all about how, like, the Tao is like a prefiguring of the Logos, basically. I thought it was a cool idea. I don't know if I was 100%, like, completely sold. But I thought it was cool. Okay. I'm feeling how this looks. I guess, you know, it's like, it's kind of interesting because part of the point of the show is like the meta-creative element. And like, I'm waiting for like, oh, there it is. That's the thing we needed. But it's kind of just coming together slowly on its own. So maybe I should just keep letting it happen, you know? Sometimes that happens. There's a painter named de Kooning, and de Kooning said, pictures are never finished. They're just abandoned. I've probably said that before on the show. I don't agree with that, but sometimes it's true. Sometimes if you're working on something, you just kind of are like, oh, well, there it is. So we'll throw on this hill over here. Is there any other symbols or symbolism we want to throw down? Let's think about what we talked about really quick. You know, Moses is a leader or teacher, passing things through time. I don't know. I'm kind of over like the little tiny symbols. We got enough like tiny symbols in here. Okay, we'll get this little thing going on over here. And let's see. You know what we'll do? I know what we'll do. This is perfect. I'm going to throw down a cloud and put like the sun behind a cloud. It's like this obscured light because I feel it's kind of appropriate. A lot of times for the older guys, the more like ancient guys, sometimes I feel like I'm looking through like the fog of time. That's what we want here. That's what I want to communicate here. It's like I'm looking through the fog of time back at these figures, and they're so powerful. I can see them through the fog, but the fog is still there. You know, I can't touch them. I can't, you know, read a biography about them. I can't, you know, but the shadow they cast is so powerful that I can still sense them through the fog. So I'm going to throw down some fog right now. That's the perfect thing that we need. I was waiting for it, and I was going to use black, but I don't know. Black cloud is like so intense, so I'm just going to kind of throw down this gray. And, you know, I always use the cloud shape. Let's see if we can just get away with, like, I still use the cloud shape. You can't really escape your nature, but let's see if I can just get away with some real, like, fog. Okay. Someone said, do you prefer Aquinas or Gregory Palamas? I don't know if I would really pin it one way or the other. I'm learning a lot about Orthodox theology right now. I do find it really interesting, and I'm kind of zooming in on like differences and things like that. But I couldn't really say. If I was going to say something like that, I'd want to be like very familiar with their work, so I couldn't totally say. I did listen to a talk. I would recommend, you know, one difference that I poked into recently that I thought was interesting. I really don't want this to be, by the way, like Orthodoxy versus Catholicism, but one thing I thought was interesting was I listened, and that because that's not how I think of it. Just for the record, I'm not thinking like, oh, point one for East team. There we go, like owned, totally owned. That's like really not how I'm thinking of it. It's very not conducive to spiritual development. But I listened to this talk about theosis by this guy who is who was, I guess, the sort of like head monk or something on Mount Athos. And it was really awesome, man. It was really awesome. Honestly, it was insane listening to it. I literally just couldn't handle it. It was so good. If you search for theosis, the true purpose of human life, it's really awesome. I don't know what to think of it philosophically, because I know there is like kind of a philosophical, the whole like essence energy distinction. I don't know if people know about this or if this is just like me and you like nerding out, but the whole like essence energy distinction thing does get a little like trippy and heady, but I'm starting to think that there is like something to it. Whether like, you know, on one side people are like, you can't have this distinction, it's divine simplicity, and on the other side people are like, no, you have to have the distinction, otherwise, you know, it's probably the next big like theological thing I'll poke into. But right now I'm sort of in the early Christian stuff. That's part of why, you know, it's funny you asked me that. That's part of why I think I went back and I'm checking out the really early Christian guys, because I kind of was like, you know, I'm so far down the road here looking at this stuff. Like, I need to see what I'm kind of curious what it was like before all this, you know? So that's part of why I started poking into the earliest Christian stuff I could find. And that's kind of what we're doing here in a way, just for now. You start with Clement of Alexandria. I got this Eusebius book, like I said, that we're going to hit. So yeah, it's kind of my off-the-cuff answer to that. Any good Orthodox reads beyond mystical theology of the Eastern Church? I'm definitely not the person to ask about that, but the main book people recommend that I did really like is Timothy Ware's book. I think it's called like The Orthodox Church or something, right? That's a really good book. It'll at least give you the perspective there. But I'm kind of all over the place, honestly. It doesn't really please anybody. It's kind of nice. I used to have political views that no one liked because it wasn't really fitting in one box, not to be like galaxy brained. But now the theology stuff, whenever I read one book, people are like, oh my god, why are you reading that? And then I read another book and people are like, oh my god, don't read that. Whatever, it's probably just the condition. It's the condition of my being. Anyway, good questions though. All right. I'm kind of feeling how this turned out. Maybe next time we'll push away from this particular style, but I'm kind of feeling how this turned out. I mean, I might just call it right now. I'm trying to decide if I should push it a little bit more or if I just want to call it. I kind of do like it. Maybe I'm going to come in here. There we go. It's kind of like vibrational lines coming off. Just a little bit. Yeah, that looks good. That looks good. Do you want to get anything else going on? Let's see. I'll throw a fish down here, and then it'll be like 2 types of Christ. And then we'll probably call it a day. In case people don't know, type means like a prefiguring symbol. It doesn't mean like a type of chair or something. Let's see, anything else I should hit? I went to this Mexican restaurant and they were serving these new dishes, palamas and dolpapa. It's funny. Was that you at the cashier? Someone said, have you seen the old Soviet film Andrei Rublev? No. But if anyone wants to recommend me movies and stuff, I'm down. My wife really likes watching movies. I'm not really a movie guy. So, yeah. Anyway, so I'll throw down this fish down here. Then we'll have two of the sort of types of Christ going on. Kind of fits with the Clement of Alexandria thing, too, because the second book, which we didn't hit, is called The Tutor. It's Christ as the ultimate teacher. So, kind of fits in a way. Little fish down here. We got to get a little one, too. You always want to mess with the scale as much as you can if you're drawing stuff. If everything's kind of the same size, which is honestly exactly what I did. If you look, actually, everything is literally kind of like the same size and scale. It kind of fits the style. But sometimes you want to mess with the scale a little bit. Like you can see down here, just getting those two fish in at different sizes make it kind of sophisticated. And I could even just come in with like a little tiny, like hinted it. Yeah, that's good. Let's get another one. I can't stop. Yeah, that's good. You can see it looks a little bit more sophisticated than if all the fish were like the exact same size. And last thing we need. Okay, we need one last thing. If anyone wants to ask me anything else, ask me, and then we're wrapping up 20 minutes late. But it's all good. Because who's going to complain? Nobody. No one's going to complain. And let's see, how should we wrap this up? That's basically it. We're going to move away from Clement of Alexandria now. And I think since we left off at the Egyptian stuff, the idea of Moses being educated in Egyptian religion, I think we're going to hit some Egyptian texts. And I'm really excited about that because I got a bunch of them here. I ordered a bunch of them and I was reading them. And I kind of hit this wall where I was like, why am I doing this, honestly? I was like, they're cool. I have a lot of like complicated thoughts about them. They actually do really, they'll fit the painting show really well because I have a lot to say about like how they're written and how it relates to like language and thought in general and the idea of like symbols and thinking and how they fit into history, being like having 1 foot in prehistory and 1 foot not. But that's what we're going to do, and I'm stoked about it. Okay, that's it. So now I'm going to move the painting palette so we can actually see what we've been doing. Probably the last chat I'll read unless someone hits me with one. Dude, Andrei Rublev is right up your alley. Totally captures the life of a 15th century icon painter. Oh, that's like that 3-hour icon painting? Yeah, dude, I'm down. I'm definitely going to read that. I actually literally have... I mean, not read it. I'll definitely watch that. I've been meaning to watch that. I just didn't know the name of it. I also literally got them on deck. Literally on deck. Anyway, so many interesting detours we can go down, but let's wrap it up. So, this is I always say this in every show. I feel the need to recap, but you were just here, so I don't need to. But that's our little ancient teacher thinking about Moses and all that stuff. And like I said, so next week we're doing the taking symbols from the chat. We'll kind of hang out and I'll get my books. I thought that was kind of cool when we were going through books and reading about symbols together and kind of making an image on the fly. But then after that, we're going to hit some Egyptian stuff. And it's going to be dope. It is going to be dope. I literally have right here. Don't get this book. This book is not good. It's translation of the coffin text, but this isn't a good translation, actually, so don't get this. But I got a bunch of them laying around. I got the pyramid text over here. I got the Egyptian Book of the Dead, so it's going to be dope. And I'm amped. But for now, we leave off with our enigmatic figure of Moses. Thank you for coming through to the show. I really appreciate it. I really do look forward to hanging out with you guys on the show. It's a really good time. It's a really good time. One of the highlights of my week, for sure. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the direction the show's going in. And I will catch you guys next week. And I will also catch you on the internet where we all hang out together. Thank you for the work that you're doing. It's contributing to a greater good, even if you don't feel like it is. I know, sometimes it feels like it's not. Anyway, that's it. And I'll see you guys later. I need an outro, but I don't have one now.